I'm going to create a fresh master material. So I'm going to go to my materials folder, and I'm going to right click just on the empty space and choose material to create a master material. And I sometimes get asked in my courses, like, is it more efficient to assign a material to the object, or is it more efficient to assign a material instant to an actor? And in terms of efficiency, how the game uses it, there's not going to be any difference. But how the user, how the editor, how I and you are using it in Unreal Engine, it's going to be much faster using material instances because it only has to compile the master material once. Whereas if I have a master material for literally everything, it'd have to compile that each time I want to use it. Once the game is running, though, at that stage, it doesn't really matter anymore. So, but that's not an excuse for not using material instances. Assign material instances to your assets. Don't assign master materials to your assets. OK, so I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call this _ORM, because this is going to be a master material that's going to be set up to expect ORM maps and that kind of substance pipeline. I could also just call this substance painter, but however you want to identify it, it's up to you. OK, now for the previous example, we used specific texture maps. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to import in some textures that are just going to be blank files. It's just going to be a white texture file and a neutral normal map that is just perfectly even. That way, if I don't have a normal map, I can still set up my shader as if I'm expecting one. But if I don't have a custom one, it's not going to affect the look of my shader. Versus if I didn't have a normal map and I tried to use this shader, well, it's always going to try and apply this football normal map each time, which is going to be annoying to kind of work around. So I'm going to grab the other textures that I put on the Learning Hub, and I just called them material dependencies, I think. And I have 3 textures here. And these represent the texture types that we're going to be using. So the blank color, this white one, represents, say, a base color map. It's going to represent a color. Normal is going to represent the normal map. And then blank white mask is going to represent anything that's going to be interpreted as a black and white map. So a metallic map, roughness map, ORM map, edge map, cavity map, etc. So I'm going to, in my textures folder, just create a new folder here called material, or I'm just going to call it dependencies. I'm going to place all of these blank textures in it. And these are just 128 by 128 textures. They're just placeholder textures. You can see here that blank normal was imported as a normal map. Blank color still has sRGB on. And blank white mask, this is the one that I'm trying to say is an ORM map. So if it's an ORM map, I need to turn off sRGB. And the reason why I need to kind of turn off sRGB is because when I lay down a texture sample node in my editor here, each one of these texture sampler nodes has a sampler type. A base color map or a color map is going to have a sampler type of color. That means it used the default with sRGB turned on. The ORM has a linear color sampler type, which means that it had the default, but sRGB was turned off. So it's linear. It has no gamma encoding on it. And then the normal has a sampler type of normal. So when I drop in a file here, such as this plant ORM, it's going to see that it's a sampler type linear color. This one, pot ORM, I forgot to toggle this off. So if I drop this in, you can see its sampler type is set to color. So if I go to use that in my material instance, I'm going to get a warning message up here saying that this texture that you're using here, it's expecting linear color, but the texture that you actually put in has a sampler type of color. So I'm going to get a warning here. This is another indicator that, hey, you forgot to turn off sRGB. So that's why we're setting these sRGB on or off on these default ones, these dependencies, so that when I drop in a sampler type, it's going to choose the correct type of maps to be loaded in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up our ORM shader. And I'm going to go to my dependencies folder, and I'm going to set it up similarly to how I set up that previous example, right? So I'm going to drag in my blank color and just plug in the RGB into the RGB. I'm going to put this into a parameter by right-clicking Convert to Parameter and assign a group. Okay, so I converted it to a parameter, called it base color. I'm going to place this in a group called maps, and I'll set my sort priority to 0 so that it comes first. I'm now going to grab my blank white mask and treat this as if it's a ORM map. So I'll drop this in, and you can see the sampler type detected it as linear color, meaning sRGB was disabled, versus this one, which has color. Even though they look identical, the sampler types are different, and that makes a big difference. So here, I'm going to plug in O to the ambient occlusion, R to the roughness, and M to the metallic. I'm going to right-click this, convert this to a parameter, and I'm going to just call this one ORM, and put this in my maps group. I'm going to set my sort priority to 2 for now, because I know a normal map is going to go in between it. You work the way that you want to work, or I'll set this to 1, and I'll set my normal to 2. So again, just dropping in the normal, the blank normal. So this is just a flat 128, 128, 255 color. Sampler type is normal. Convert this. Plug this into my maps, and then this is going to be sort priority 2. Okay, awesome. So now we're right back to where we started with our other materials that we created. So if I right-click and create a material instance, and I'll just call this one MI pot leaves, just so we can kind of see how this is looking. I want to check my material instance kind of periodically as I'm building up my master material, so that if I've forgotten to name something or forgotten to group something, I can kind of catch it right away, rather than doing it all at the end. It's up to you, but I recommend staying honest as you work and trying to get these in the right order and all that. Cool. So this is all working out good so far. But I said I wanted to have some controls on this stuff. So one of the kind of first things that we'll often do is we want the ability to kind of slightly adjust our color of things. So there's a number of ways that we can approach this. But one way is simply by applying a multiply blend node with a color laid over top of it. So this would be the same thing as, grabbing a layer in Photoshop, grabbing a color, and then saying multiply. It'd be the exact same approach here. So to make adjustments like that, I can just right-click, find the node that I'm looking for. I got a blends category here. So these are all the blends that kind of come shipped with Unreal. And you'll notice a lot of them have the same types as you would find in Photoshop or Substance or anything like that. And they're going to work the same way. So what I'm looking for is multiply. So it's probably somewhere else, but easier way of doing it, just holding down M and left-clicking. So now we can multiply the base color by another color. So if I hold down 3 on the keyboard, that's going to give me a 3 constant, or a 3 vector. If I hold down 2, that'll give me a 2 constant. If I hold down 1, that'll give me a 1 constant. So hold down 1 and click, hold down 2 and click. So if I take this 3 vector and multiply it by the base color, and then take the result of it, plug that into base color, I can now change the look of my base color map. However, whenever we multiply something, we want to make sure that our default value is probably going to be 1. And the reason being is if you just take a number, you multiply it by 1, it's going to be that original number. So this way, I'm not going to automatically apply a color change. I'm going to have to kind of manually go in and make adjustments if I want that. If I leave this at a constant of 0, if you multiply anything by 0, it's always going to be 0, so it's always going to come out black. So our default values here is going to be important. I want to take this 3 vector, though, and I want to convert this to a parameter so that the artist can adjust it within the material instance. So I can right-click on that vector, say convert to parameter, and I'll just call this base color tint. And then set my default value to white. It's currently not in a group, so I'm going to go ahead and just make a group called adjustments. Base color tint is probably going to be one that I adjust quite often, so I'll just make it top of the list by giving it a sort priority of 0 for the moment, but we may be changing that depending on what comes after. Okay, so I hit save, and I'm going to go back to my material instance. So if I don't have one yet, just right-click on that ORM, create a material instance. I'm going to use the pot leaves texture maps. So I'm going to just immediately swap out my texture maps with my plant base color, my plant ORM, and my plant normal. Okay, I'm going to assign that to these leaves, just to the ones in the scene. You see it's compiling quickly. It needs to do that the first time you kind of use one of these assets or one of these materials. Cool. So with that material instance assigned, I can now very quickly and easily kind of make adjustments to my base color, and I'm able to kind of see this update right away. If I try and do the same operation while I'm here in the master material editor and start like tinting this red and stuff, I have to hit OK, right? I have to hit OK, and it makes working in look dev quite slow. So we don't want to do our look dev really too much in our master material. I want to quickly create a material instance so that I can kind of right away see what it looks like as I'm kind of making some adjustments. And a lot of times these adjustments that we're making here, they're just going to be kind of small adjustments to make them blend in a little bit nicer to all the props around them. I could go big and say, yeah, I want this to be a red plant, I want this to be blue. But most of the time, we're kind of just doing our final tweaks here to be like, it kind of looks a little too saturated right now. You know, maybe if I darken it, it may add a little bit more blue. That's going to blend in nicer to the surroundings. Cool. So I got my first kind of parameters created, and we're going to set up the most standard parameters for these that we're going to be using for our material instances. But don't think what we're setting up today is kind of the be-all, end-all for what you need for materials. If you need something, you can just go in and build it, right? If you need to add an extra map here because you want to also blend in, maybe you've got a cavity map or maybe you have an edge map that detects where all the edges of your model are. You exported that from Substance Painter. Well, you could add that edge map here, and then you could apply a tint using that edge map as a kind of mask, as a multiplier, to be able to kind of make adjustments. And you would just create that for the thing that you need. Maybe you're making a rock shade or whatever. But I'm going to set you up with kind of the basics, but don't think you can't take it kind of further than what I'm doing here. Okay, any questions on this so far? No? Okay, because we're going to kind of just crank through all the other materials pretty quick, or other parameters pretty quick.